Okay, so we are going to be taking a look at selection and cutting and pasting various objects in Photoshop today. So you can see I have my photograph of the top hat and my gloves, and I would like to use them as separate entities in a document. So there's various selection tools in Photoshop, and the basic ones are you've got the shape, if you know it's going to be a rectangle or an ellipse, you can just, put the circle on there. You can move things around with your keypad or your cursor. And if I hit a Control C, Control V, you can see on the right-hand side on my new layer, I have copied whatever was inside that marquee. Okay, so that's okay, but I want something more specific. So another way to do it would be to use things like the lasso, the polygonal lasso, or the magnetic lasso. And the lasso is basically you are drawing a shape, and again, Control C, Control V. Whatever's in that shape will be copied and pasted. And Photoshop loves to put things on new layers. So every single thing you cut and paste will be on another layer. If you need to move things around, you can use the move tool up on top there, and that will allow you to move whatever layer you're on and move things around, right? So both of those are fine, but I'm still not getting really precise. So I can do a polygonal lasso tool, which basically is more like an illustrator function because it goes point to point, right? But it's kind of angular. So this is really good if you're going to be doing a selection of something which is very rectangular, right? Because with that, right, it's okay, but still not what I'm looking for. So magnetic lasso tool, this used to be the cool one because it would basically stick to the edge of whatever you were trying to select. And that was kind of the handiest one. Getting there, right? But the one that is really useful for things like this is actually object selection tool. So what that one does is I'm going to delete all my layers here because I'm getting quite a collection of things I don't want. So I'm going to delete all those layers. And then this one allows me to select an object. I'm kind of marqueing over it, and it selects what's underneath. Although it's not loving my hat, I have to say. My quick selection. There we go. So sometimes the object selection doesn't select your whole object. So for this one, my quick selection tool was the one that did it. And basically you just marquee over and it finds the outline for you. So for that one, I'm going to Control C, Control V, and you will see I now have a beautiful top hat. And then I'm going to use the same thing for my gloves. Whoops, make sure you are on the right layer because otherwise it's not going to have anything to select. There we go. C, Control V. And then I'm going to go back down onto my background layer. And Control-C, Control-V. And what that gives me now is my beautiful top hat and my gloves on separate layers, each one. Now, if you want two things on the same layer, you can do a merge down, which will put those two together on the same layer, right? And then they will basically be functioning as one object in the layer. I'm actually going to step back and keep them as two different layers because I want to do a little bit of, have some fun with multiples. So I'm going to pull that down to the plus, and it gives me a layer copy. So then I now have two of the same, right? So now there's two of them. And I'm going to do that with my hat. So I have, depending on what layer I'm going on, I have my multiple hats. Now, another cool thing you can do with your layers is you can change the opacity. And if I take it down, it just makes it more transparent. So you can make parts of your composition more or less transparent. Now, what I want to do actually here is I want to put in a new blank layer. And I actually want to fill. I want to make sure it's the bottom layer above my everything else. So let's move you down. There we go. And then I'm going to do edit fill. And you can fill with a color. You can fill with white. And you've got foreground color, background color. Those are over here. Right now, my foreground color is a black, but I'm actually going to fill my artboard with white. But if I wanted to do a specific color, I could head over here and it's telling me what the current color is, but if I wanted to do a nice rich red, then I could do an edit fill. And instead of white, I could do foreground color, which would give me a nice rich red for my document. And like Illustrator, Photoshop is a stack of pancakes. So it is one on top of the other, and you can move them around accordingly. I can move things above or below. Do you see how that one's moving down as I move it backwards? I can also grab an item and I can transform it. Now, I like to use the hotkey T for transform, and then you can pull a corner to make it larger or smaller, and then hit done. And I'm pretty sure I have a transform tool somewhere around here. But I like to just use the hotkey of T. So Command T will transform an object. And then you can grab and pull a corner to make it larger or smaller. Okay, so those are the basic selection tools of Photoshop for creating cut out items for your compositions. Of course, if you wanted to have a photo background, you could just pull the photo, do a selection, like I could do something like this. Like I could use my marquee tool. I could select something. I could Control C, which is copy. And then I could head back into my document and I could Control V it. And it's going to put in that layer. So I'm actually going to turn off the visibility on some of my layers so I can see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to Control T it, but I'm actually going to fill my space. So I'm going to use it as a background. And there we go. And then I'm going to move it to the bottom of my stack. And then everything will be sitting on top of it. So you can use photo imagery for your background as well in Photoshop. And you can do anything really that you want. If you want to deselect, Command D, or deselect on the little bar there. Because I want to move this down a little bit. Make it a little bit bigger. Apple T, Command T, make it a little bit larger. There we go. Okay, so everything is in layers, and your selection tools, you can play around with them. If object selection tool works fine, use that first, but quick selection tool is also very useful. Now, the magic wand is really handy when if you have something that has clear outlines. Like this, I click in the magic wand and you can see how it's selected my whole background. Then if I want to do the inverse, I pull down Select Inverse, and it would then flip it to select what's inside of the marquee. Control C, Control V, and that would give me my hat. Control T. And this also allows you can play around with the Control T is very handy when you are also moving your shapes around. You can rotate and have lots of fun with that as well. Done. Okay, so that is the basics of selection and cutting parts of images out in Photoshop.